Now we're going to cover muscle tissue. Now, muscle tissue, its general characteristic is that it will shorten or contract to produce force. So most of us think of our skeletal muscles, the ones that attach to the skeleton itself and move our body around. Other types will actually be cardiac muscle that will help to pump blood, and then we also have smooth muscle that will help to move material through organs. So if we look at the three types, skeletal muscle, at least in its basic structure, attaches to the skeleton itself. So these are going to be things like the biceps or the quadriceps, the hamstrings that will actually move our joints, move our bones, but also things like our tongue that will actually move and produce sounds. Now, all of these types of skeletal muscles are going to be known as striated. Striated means that we are actually going to see bands present within each of the individual cells. Another unique characteristic is that all these skeletal muscles are going to be under voluntary control, meaning that we can consciously control them. We can say in our brain, we want to lift this weight, and our biceps will respond by lifting this weight up so that we can do a bicep curl. Cardiac muscle is the muscle of the heart. And again, this type of muscle is striated, meaning that it is banded, and we'll look at that here in a minute, but is now involuntary. So involuntary meaning we don't have to consciously say heart needs to pump over and over and over again. It'll do it without our conscious control. Now, smooth muscle is associated with tubular structures that are mostly present within our organs. So things like the intestines or the stomach are actually made of smooth muscle, as are our blood vessels. Blood vessels are constantly changing in size to either allow more blood into an area or to actually decrease blood into an area. So we contract the smooth muscle to either allow more or less blood into an area. Now, we also have our airways, and our airways will be changing in size as well based on need. When we're standing upright, we want the most amount of air to actually go to the base of our lungs because blood is going to go down there as well. And so we're actually going to constrict or limit airflow into the upper airways of the lungs and put most of that air towards the bottom where we exchange the most oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, smooth muscle, just like cardiac muscle, is involuntary, so we don't have to think about actually causing it to contract. Another unique thing about smooth muscle is that it is actually non-striated, so it does not have any banding, and we'll look at that here in just a moment. So looking at the structure of skeletal muscle is going to have long cylindrical cells. So these guys are more like cans. They run from one end to the other. Now we can get an idea of the banded appearance in skeletal muscle. We can see it here in this diagram, but also in our magnification here. The nuclei themselves, the cells of these muscle cells are actually periphery. So they've got filled so much with protein, which are going to be the contractile structures, that the nuclei are pushed towards the very, very periphery of the cells. Now there are actually multiple nuclei per each cell. These skeletal muscle cells are all attached to bone, and again, they're under voluntary control, meaning our brain, our conscious brain, has direct control over these. Cardiac muscle is actually going to be cylindrical cells as well. We can kind of see the can or cylindrical type structures, but now we're going to have branches. So cylinders with a branch, cylinder with a branch coming up to the other cell. These branches are actually going to help to coordinate all these muscles to contract at the same exact time. And this is done via having intercalated discs or gap junctions between these cells. And these cells are going to be then contracting at the exact same time. So we're actually going to allow electrical charges to run between the cells. So if we look at the cells here, here's our cylinder, and here's a branch coming down to an adjacent cell. Here's our cylinder of a cell with a branch coming up to here. Same thing here. We have a branch coming to here. And then these little guys right here are going to be our intercalated discs where these cells actually talk to each other and are going to allow electrical charges to pass through. Now, cardiac muscle is only located in the heart. Because it has all these branches, The heart is just a fancy pump for blood. We need all these chambers of the heart to actually close down and actually limit that space, so we eject a large proportion of the blood that fills the spaces inside the heart, and so it'll pump blood around the entire body. Now, cardiac muscle is involuntary. Involuntary means that we don't have to think about each individual pump of the heart, and in fact, unconscious parts of our brain actually will control it, things like the brain stem. Now, we can also get a little hint of a banded type of appearance. Very light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, very small in here. These are that striations, and these are going to be similar to our skeletal muscle, but they're not quite as prominent as our skeletal muscle actually is. But we do have a banded type of appearance that you can see throughout the cardiac muscle. Smooth muscle is going to be different. It is not going to be banded. So if we look in these cells, again, no alternating light and dark, no alternating light and dark. So they're not banded. This is because the contractile portions of the muscle do not line up perfectly to give us that banded appearance. Now, the cells of smooth muscle are no longer going to be cylindrical. They're actually going to be spindle shaped. So they're wide in the middle, taper towards each side, wide in the middle, taper towards each side with a central single nucleus. Again, smooth muscle is going to be located within hollow tubes, mostly organs. So here's our esophagus coming down from the mouth, our stomach, our large intestines, our small intestines. All this is smooth muscle. Now, we'll also have it in blood vessels, and blood vessels are going to be there to carry blood from one place to another. They will limit blood flow to an area by constricting and actually shrinking the size of the blood vessels, or they enhance the amount of blood going to an area by actually relaxing and opening the size of the blood vessel. Now, the pupil of the eye is also an example of smooth muscle. So when we're trying to limit light into the eye, our pupil will actually shrink in size, and we'll actually get smooth muscle contraction to limit, but we'll also have smooth muscle contraction that will pull it open to allow more light into the eye. All smooth muscle is involuntary, so we actually will have no conscious control over the functioning of smooth muscle, but most of the time we're regulating sizes of these hollow organs for movements that we, again, don't really need to have conscious control over. So this is a comparison of each of these different types of skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle in terms of characteristics that are unique to each. So cell shape, again, these are going to be very long cylindrical cells. Notice 4 centimeters. These are a couple of inches almost, can be the size of some of these cells, very, very large. Cardiac muscles are going to be cylindrical, but they're also going to be shorter in length. They have branches as well. Smooth muscles are going to be spindle shaped, wide in the middle, tapering towards each side. And again, both of these are going to be smaller than we actually see in the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscle nuclei, they're actually going to be multiple nuclei. They're all peripherally located because the center of the cells are packed with contractile material that give us those striations. In cardiac as well as smooth muscle, they're a single centrally located nucleus. So this is another thing that sets apart skeletal muscle. Striations, we see the banded appearance in cardiac as well as skeletal muscle, but we not see that banded appearance in the smooth muscle because those contractile units don't line up in perfect alignment. Now, voluntary control, skeletal muscle is the only one that is under voluntary control. Cardiac as well as smooth muscle are both under involuntary control, and so these are, again, we're not going to need a conscious thought to actually get them to contract. We also will have spontaneous contractions within smooth muscle as well as cardiac muscle, and you might have heard of the pacemaker of the heart. Cardiac muscle actually has a pacemaker that will set it to contract essentially involuntary or spontaneously, and all our brain does is either enhance that and make it contract faster, or actually slow it down and make the heart contract slower. There's a similar sort of function within smooth muscle, but it's mostly based on stretch. So as the stomach stretches as we enter food into the area, it will actually stretch open, and under that stretch, it will actually start to contract as a result of that stretch. Functions of skeletal muscle, it moves the body. It moves our skeleton, it moves our joints, all those sort of things. Cardiac muscle is only a pump for blood. It pumps blood around the entire body. Smooth muscle has a ton of different functions. So the digestive tract we've talked about, the stomach, the intestines, it's going to move food through there from one end all the way to the other. It is also going to empty our bladder, our urinary bladder that will actually hold urine within it until we're ready to void. It'll control the size of blood vessels that we've already talked about. It controls the pupil size, but it also will help to contract ducts. So as a woman produces milk after labor and producing a baby, we'll actually have ducts within the mammary glands that will actually empty when a baby is suckling. So as a mom is um, breastfeeding, the child will be stimulating the nipple and will actually get contraction of smooth muscle that will force the milk that is present within the full breast to actually express out into the baby's mouth. We also have hairs on our skin surface that will actually be elevated or raised via smooth muscles that will actually give us a better sense of something going on around us. Now, just some special features. We again will have gap junctions between cardiac muscle and smooth muscle, and that's because a lot of these cells function together as units, oftentimes as sheets around either the entire heart or around the entire hollow organ that will then contract together. In cardiac muscle, we also have branching fibers that help to connect those so that, again, adjacent cells will function at the same exact time so that we get a very, very efficient pump. Here's another video I want you to watch. Again, it's available in your PowerPoint, but I'm not going to show it during this recording.